seconds. 5 seconds.
Good morning, all. On behalf of my colleagues, Ms. Sheena Glasgow, Ms. Susan Bothwell, and Mr. Ernest Scott, the deputy who's in Cayman Brac, I want to thank you for coming out to our sort of pre-election press briefing and sort of town hall meeting to talk about what's going to happen over the next 11 days or so, and to give you a latest update as to some of the key figures that we have and some of the key issues that we're dealing with and some of the key messages we want to get out within the next week. So going straight to postal ballots. First off, the deadline for postal ballot application is this afternoon at 5. So far, as of yesterday, we've issued 464 postal ballots, which I think is a record. So those are issued to persons who are off island or traveling off island and can provide proof of that. One quick note to persons who may be serving as agents to candidates and candidates themselves. Part of the postal ballot package is a declaration of identity, which has to be witnessed. It's an offense for a candidate or an agent to witness that declaration of identity. So if we come across that, then that's something that we send through for investigation. So we're reminding candidates and agents not to sign any declarations of identity for postal ballots. Mobile ballots. Mobile is available for persons who are working on election day. That includes our own staff, persons like police officers, doctors, nurses, persons in hotels. Their deadline for applications is also today. We start mobile voting on Tuesday, and we follow through until Friday of next week, the 19th. So far, we've received 280 applications for mobile voting. For persons who are interested to know if their mobile voting has been received and approved, we have a list of mobile voting and postal ballots issued on our website on the homepage. You can go there and download the list by electoral district and surname and first name of the persons who have been approved for mobile voting. Mobile voting starts, as I said, on Tuesday, May 16th with Boddentown East, Boddentown West, Newlands, Savannah, and Prospect. For fixed mobile, these are the persons who are working and are able to move around freely. They vote between 8 a.m. and 2 p.m. at the fixed location. For the persons who have requested that we come to their homes or other places where they may be, like the hospital, we start rolling the bus out at 9 a.m. and we go until we're done, or if we don't finish at 8 a.m. then we'll pick up at 8 p.m. We'll pick up the next morning, but our hope is that we'll be done fairly early in the evening with all the mobile voting, the house to house. On Wednesday, we then move to West Bay North, West Bay Central, West Bay West, and West Bay South, and we also then pick up Georgetown North on Wednesday. Same time again. So each of those electoral districts will have a stationary mobile location for people to do their advance voting, and they'll also have a bus that's going sort of house to house as well. Thursday, May 18th, we have Georgetown Central, Georgetown West, Georgetown South, Georgetown East, Red Bay, and Little Cayman. So the folks on Little Cayman will actually fly across the polling team, and there are 28 registered voters on Little Cayman, and we hope to get them all if they're all on island. If we miss them, then they have to fly over to Cayman Brac on May 24th to vote in person at the polls.
Sorry, the team's coming from Cayman Brac?
The team is going from Cayman Brac to Little Cayman. And May 19th then is Northside, East End, Cayman Brac East, and Cayman Brac West. Already covered. Little Cayman hours are 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. So they fly in, set up. I think they have 1 or 2 house calls to make, and they cover those and then wrap up at 1 and fly back to Cayman Brac. Cayman Brac, the team will do mobile voting from 8 a.m. until about 1 p.m. and then they'll go on the road from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. when they're done. Just because the voting numbers are lower, we're not doing a parallel stationary and bus at the same time in Cayman Brac. Same for North Side and East End here as well. On election day, we were asking agents that are doing the polls to be present well before 7 a.m. We want to be able to swear them in, issue them with their IDs, their list of voters who will be voting in that polling station, and be ready at 7 a.m. sharp to start polling persons. We have 660 minutes in which to poll persons. Some of our polling stations range from 240, 250 up to 450. So we're on tight timelines, and we don't want to have to pause polling in order to swear in an agent who shows up late. So we're asking for them to come early. So even agents who are working sort of a split shift and they're working in the afternoon, we ask them to come out in the morning, get sworn in, get their ID, and then they can come back for their shift, and it will be an easy transition with them. At that time, we'll be showing ballot boxes before 7 o'clock, open and empty. We'll seal them up in the presence of the agents, and the agents will then sort of stay with those boxes throughout the day and accompany them over to the counting station, which will be at the same place as the polling station, the same site, and proceed through to the count. So from the time we start until we finish counting the boxes, they should be in view of agents and those present within the polling station at all time. Polling is from 7 a.m. until 6 p.m. Polls close at 6. Any persons within the confines of the polling station, the polling division, can still be polled after 6 o'clock if they make it through the gates on time. But we're hoping that we'll get everybody in. We don't have any persons running across the finish line at 1 minute to 6. At the end of polling, each presiding officer will go through a balancing exercise where they account for all their ballot papers, spoiled ones, ballot papers issued, and then do a sort of semi-report that they give over to the returning officer so that we can then account for each ballot paper during the count. We're expecting the counts to start at 7 p.m., so that's about an hour after the close of the poll. Every electoral district will have its own counting station. By law, that's what we have to do. But we also have 6 deputy returning officers this year, and they will also be counting as well as their returning officers. So those electoral districts that will have 2 simultaneous counts going on are Boddentown East, Savannah, Georgetown North, Georgetown West, West Bay North, and West Bay West. And we're hoping for the counts to be done before midnight is our goal. Some may be in as early as 9 o'clock from East End, North Side, Cayman Brac, East and West, because of their smaller numbers of voters within their electoral districts. We have some special cases for persons voting with assistance, needing assistance. This year we have photos and party symbols or indication of an independent status on the ballot paper. So we're hoping that most people will be able to vote unassisted, but we do know that some people are, sight impaired or otherwise unable to vote, to mark the ballot paper themselves. In that case, they can opt to have a friend present to observe the marking of the ballot paper. The ballot paper, if assistance is needed, is marked by the presiding officer. It's done right at the table, so it's not done in a booth. The job of the friend is not to speak on behalf of the voter, but to ensure that the presiding officer marks the ballot paper as they have been instructed to do so by the voter. This year around, we're not having professional friends anymore, so a friend can only assist one voter at a time on election day. So one voter period. We had situations where the same persons were assisting, in some cases, dozens of voters. We have, as part of our tenet, the secrecy of the vote. When you have a friend witnessing what's been marked, that's somebody else that's aware of how a ballot paper is being marked. And we've received complaints about it. The law was amended to restrict that to one. We covered with the candidates, sort of what we go through in terms of counting of ballot papers. persons are instructed to mark with an X, some people mark with a check or other symbols. The key driver for us, and we use tested Commonwealth law in terms of what's acceptable for a ballot that can be counted and what's considered a spot ballot, is to ensure that we can clearly see what the intent of the voter is, and if we can see the intent, then the ballot paper is counted as valid. The counting process literally involves the returning officer or deputy picking up a ballot, calling a name, and then showing the ballot paper to everyone in the room so that they can see how it's marked, and if they're questionable ones or ones that the markings aren't quite as clear, they take a bit more time to actually make sure that they have the agreement on there. By law, recounts are on a box-by-box basis only. You can request a recount of the last box that was dealt with. So in the cases of Bordentown, we have 7 boxes to count. So when we complete box 1 and we move on to box 2, we can't recount box 1. And if you get to box 7 at the end of the night and somebody wants a recount, then it's box 1 that's being recounted. Any other recounts than that have to go through the court system. So our system has been by box. And I have to say, because of the process that we use, because we show the ballot paper as we do it, because everybody in the room has the same tally sheets, and that process is normally a very straightforward one, and the recounts have not been an issue for us, and I expect the same around this time.
Did you have IDs on sport ballots?
Okay. Sport ballots, if persons spoil their ballots when they come in to vote unassisted, by law they can spoil up to 3, at which point we have to offer assistance to them. We won't issue them with another one. Also want to cover the whole issue of voter ID. So we've been traveling around to the different districts and centrally handing out, issuing voter IDs, and we've received questions from the media and questions from voters. So we want to make it clear, the law requires that we issue voter IDs, but it doesn't require that voters use the IDs. So voters can use other forms of official ID when they come out to vote. We hope that they all get their voter IDs, but if they don't, they can still use a driver's license or a passport or something such. And in the event that somebody shows up and has no ID, there is a process in the law for that to be dealt with as well, and that involves them taking an oath and sort of satisfying the presiding officer that they are who they say they are. And because we have agents in the room who are registered voters in electoral districts in which they're being an agent, we're relying on them as well to help identify persons. So if somebody comes in, pretending to be Wendy Ledger and they're not, we'll have some protests in the room that will help to balance out those issues. We had a briefing with candidates and agents on Saturday, last Saturday, and we covered some things, particularly around some do's and don'ts. Biggest of which, in terms of size, are the political signs on the side of the road. So those will all have to come down by midnight on the 23rd, so there's no signage up at all on the 24th. Same for any billboards, any radio, television, newspaper adverts. So the 24th is a dry day from a political campaigning perspective. We're also asking them not to send any text messages or WhatsApp or other messages because we're now in an electronic age, so it's not only billboards down the side of the road. We're not allowing folks to come into the polling stations wearing campaign t-shirts. So if you're wearing a shirt that says vote for candidate X or candidate Y, sorry, and you have a candidate's name, vote for, on there, or a party t-shirt, we're going to ask you to go and change that or to cover it up in some way. Colors are acceptable. We won't turn you back if you're wearing a color that's identified with someone, but definitely no campaigning t-shirts. And polling station etiquette, we're asking voters and the agents in the room to be professional and be polite. We want to be as efficient as we can be in there, and we're asking folks to come in, receive their ballot paper, do their voting, and then leave the compound. The police will be on site at each of the electoral districts. They have a robust operational plan for police at presence inside polling stations and around electoral districts in general, and relying on them and confident that they're going to do their jobs to help keep the proceedings orderly and safe.
We'll poll elderly and
Yeah.
handicapped.
We're hoping that persons who have a bit more difficulty moving around will take advantage of the mobile, but if they don't and they come out to poll on election day, then our staff have been advised that they will fast track them. So an elderly person, somebody needing some assistance, will be moved to the front of the line and polled quicker than the other person's waiting. So we want
More healthy and robust.
yeah, so we want the able persons to realize that we'll be doing that, and it's no disrespect. We just want to make sure that we get through. In our briefing with the agents and candidates last week, we also covered some of the complaints that we've been hearing, either directly at the office or through social media and otherwise. Excessive food treating, vote buying, gift giving, furniture and white appliances and those things. My advice and my recommendation to the agents and candidates is, if you see something happening, then please contact the police right away. We work on a system of evidence, and the sooner the police are involved, the more opportune they are to collect evidence and take matters forward, particularly when it comes to treating. If they've already eaten all the evidence, there's not much we can do the day after. So, so that for me is sort of our play-by-play. On election day, we'll be using this building as our command center. The counts will be, as I said, distributed to the electoral districts. There's a media room being set up in the ground floor conference room. That's a large conference room. It'll live stream the hourly count of number of persons polled during the day, and then at night it will switch to the results of each box in each electoral district as those are reported in. We're committed to doing an hourly face-to-face with the media downstairs so that we can speak directly to you and answer any questions that you may have. But it's here, not Family Life Center, and we're hoping to have a much more engaging experience with you as far as keeping the counts going and the updates flowing to you. So that's it for us, unless my colleagues have any.
The only thing I'd like to add is that for the voter ID collection, voters have until May 19th to get their ID cards. The elections office is still open every day on the 3rd floor of Smith Road Center. So we do encourage people to get your new voter IDs, and the reason we have them is because we have a new electoral district system, and your voter ID will actually specify which electoral district you fall in. And certainly bring them on election day. Bring your voter ID. I know that the law doesn't specify, but that is the actual purpose of the voter ID. So we encourage you to bring them and come out to vote.
I would only add and stress that the deadline for submitting applications for both mobile and postal ballots is today, and encourage people not to wait until 5 o'clock to do that. We are aiming to issue whatever last minute applications come in today. We're aiming to issue those tomorrow, because come Tuesday we're actually out on the roads taking care of mobile polling, so we don't want the two processes to overlap.
Right.
One more reminder from me as well, jog my memory. There's another deadline for candidates. They must appoint their agents by the 14th, which is Sunday. They can drop them off today in person, or they can email them in. We really need those, particularly for the candidates who have agents working mobile on Tuesday. Monday being a holiday, there's not a whole lot of time left between those two. So that's it for us. Open up for questions.
You said that a vote is counted as long as you guys can identify the voter's intent. In that case, what is considered a spoiled ballot?
A spoiled ballot is where somebody votes for more than one candidate, for example. They can also spoil their ballot by writing their name or some other identifying manner on the ballot paper. or they mark it in such a way that we can't tell. So if you mark an X and your intersection is on the line between two, exactly on the line between two candidates, then that's a spot ballot. So we're hoping that folks will, follow the instructions and do that. But in the past, we've had very low percentages of spot ballots, even when folks were voting for, up to 6 persons. So we don't expect that to be a major issue.
2 final questions. Are candidates allowed to stand around the polling stations on election day?
So candidates can be in the polling stations the whole day long. If they don't have any agents, they can actually sit there. What they can't do is actively campaign on election day. But the candidates are allowed to sit and watch. So in the past, when we had the multi-member electoral districts, a candidate in Georgetown, for example, had 6 polling divisions which are physically, geographically separated areas, and they would sort of move from one to the next. This time around, each candidate has one electoral district, which is one location. They may have up to 4 polling stations, but they're going to be on that compound for the majority of the day. So we expect to see more of candidates. We just remind them that it's not a campaigning day. They're there. Some of them come there to vote, and others will sit there as agents and check off who has come in to vote, along with our checkoffs as well.
Final question. You said that you've asked candidates not to send texts, phone calls, social media on the day. Is there any way you guys plan to ensure that that doesn't happen, or is that just you guys just asking out of courtesy?
We're advising what the law says. There are penalties for doing it if we have evidence of it. So we're just advising folks ahead of time that, here's a provision in the law that we're bringing your attention to. Be aware that it also covers electronic media, because some folks only think of billboards and printed media, don't think of websites and banner ads and text messages.
I just want to say one thing before we move on to the next question. I think a fundamental point is that I want to remind voters you can only cast one vote. So on the ballot paper, you may have a number of candidates, but you can only put your X against the name of one candidate. So it is single member, one person, one vote. And so just to remember that on election day.
And the presiding officers, who are the persons handing the ballot paper to the voters, their instructions are that you can mark an X for a candidate of your choice, 1 X. So that message goes in there. There's also by law a instruction to voters that is placed inside the poll booth, again covers that, and it also indicates that there's only 1 vote per candidate, per voter for 1 candidate on their ballot paper. So that message is being driven home.
Along those lines, as we're talking about the actual process of voting, we would also then encourage the voters to get to know where their polling station is going to be, the polling division and the polling station. The elections office does have banners outside every location at this point in time to give and help signposts for voters as they travel throughout their districts where they need to go for each and every electoral district. So I want to make sure that people don't go to a polling division that they don't vote in and that they waste that sort of a time on election day. So vote for 1 person, vote for 1 candidate, decide which candidate you want to vote for, and learn where your electoral polling division is going to be, so that you know the exact place you need to go on the 24th to cast that 1 vote.
Sorry, I lied. One last question for you now. For first-time voters who think that they may have spoiled their ballot, what is the procedure that they must do in order to get a new ballot to cast their vote? Excellent
question. So if they're voting by postal, they can return it back to the returning officer and indicate that it's spoiled and request a new ballot paper. If they're voting in person at mobile, or they're voting in person on polling day, then they come back with their ballot paper. They indicate that it's spoiled. We don't open the ballot paper. We mark spoiled on the outside. We stick it in an envelope for that, and we issue them a new ballot paper. So we do that up to 3 times. If you spoil 3 ballot papers, then we offer assistance, because it means that you need some assistance in marking. That's by law. Wendy?
Ms. Wesley,
If I may just elaborate, because you were talking about first-time voters specifically. as Mr. Howell indicated, the presiding officer will show them the ballot and give them the instructions on how to mark the ballot. That ballot paper is then folded when it's given to them. So they take it into the polling booth, folded, and it's returned to the presiding officer folded, because again, we want to protect the privacy of their vote. That's why Mr. Howell said when they bring the spoiled ballot back to the presiding officer, we don't open it, it's already folded. We simply mark spoiled across it, put it in an envelope for any spoiled ballots, and then issue them a new one that they can go back into the booth and poll. Sorry, Wendy.
No, that's okay. I have a question actually about spoiled ballots as well. The first thing I want to ask though is, what's the situation with the election supervisors? When are they coming? Will we get to meet them beforehand? Are they here already? So any information you can give on that. Secondly, I'd specifically like to ask you about spoiled ballots, because it's still a democratic right to deliberately spoil your ballot, to, like, if they, people do that, they write on it a different candidate's name or none of the above. Do you mark a difference between what could be considered a democratically spoiled ballot that should really be counted, and then all the ones that are spoiled because people mess up in the polling? Do you have, is there a difference? So like you said, we keep the spoiled ballots that we replace, so if somebody goes, I've messed up, can I get another one? You'll put that in a separate envelope. But then during the course of the count, out of the boxes may come spoiled ballots.
Yeah.
And it's important to know, I think, what the percentage of the vote is that have spoiled it, because it gives us all an idea of the satisfaction with the process. So I just want to know how that's identified to the public, and those are my questions.
So the public won't necessarily know what's been spoiled within the polling station, because those are sealed up and essentially not open unless there's a court matter. But the ones that are counted and they're spoiled, then what we've actually done this time around is amended our tally sheets. So now that we have single member electoral districts, we have essentially a tally line for each candidate and one for spoiled ballots. So that's being done on a per box, per polling station basis. So those are stats that we can now keep to see what are the percentage of, really spoiled ballots that are coming out during the count process. By adding the spoiled ballot to it, it saves us one step in counting the number of ballots cast. So if you can imagine, in West Bay, you could vote for up to 4 persons. So there's no way we could do the math between number of candidates voted for and number of ballot papers cast, even if we counted spoiled. But now you either vote for a candidate or it's spoiled. We now have a straightforward system of one, tracking spoiled ballot papers, and two, doing a dual count. So by the time we finish with the box, we know how many candidates have received what votes and how many ballot papers are counted as well. And that's information that we'll publish.
And so that's going to be completely separate from these, I made a mistake.
Yeah. So those are sort of internal things. Those are sealed away, and we don't even open those because they really don't count at that point.
Yeah, they don't have media ballot.
The observers.
The question on the observers, so we are at arm's length on the observers. They'll be here for the week of polling. I don't believe they're arriving in time to see any of the mobile polling, but they'll be here for the 24th. They've requested some information from us, such as contact information for you guys, which we've sent to them, so I hope that they follow through and set up their meetings with you, but that is not something that we're coordinating because they're working very independently of us, seeing as they're auditing us in effect.
Could you just speak briefly to the agents, what they're for, how that all works?
Yeah. So the agents are persons appointed by candidates. They have to be registered voters within the electoral district in which they're serving, and their job really is to act as an agent when act as a candidate when the candidate can't be there. So again, take Bordentown, for example. All the electoral districts in Bordentown, Bordentown West, East, Newlands, and Savannah have 4 polling stations that would be running parallel. And then we have to count, and we have mobile. So it's literally impossible for the candidate to be everywhere. So they can appoint persons to come and represent them. So they're checking off the list of persons who have voted to ensure that nobody votes twice. They're looking at the process as it goes on to make sure that our staff are doing what they're supposed to be doing, so that the entire system is very transparent and visible. And then from that, we sort of that's where we get our credibility and confidence in the result. So those agents serve a really important role in terms of check and balance for us, and all the way through to the count. Yeah.
And I think the supervisor indicated earlier on in the press briefing about if someone came without an ID, but they came to vote, because there's a mechanism for someone to vote by taking the oath, we have to be certain of their identity. So that is another way in which the agents play a reinforcing role, because if this person says, I am John Brown, and from the district of, electoral district of Bordentown East, and people know, like, I know he's not John Brown, it would be the role of the agent to speak up and say, no, he is this person. And then the elections officer will have to make a decision as to whether or not to allow that person to vote. Certainly, we spoke about, if you actually look at the elections process itself on polling day, the box is empty, it is shown to everybody, it is sealed, the agents go in and they all sign, they see the ballots going in. When the ballot process has finished, the polling has finished, then of course we have to transfer the box over to the counting rooms. So they do play, as Mr. Howell has said, they play a very integral part in the transparency of the elections process. And so we are, as he said, please, candidates, if you have agents, make sure they're signed up now. Please come early on election day, because we don't want to disrupt the poll, but certainly they do play a very valuable role.
Actually, their role started several weeks ago, in that they were able to observe the issuance of postal ballots. So every time the returning officer got applications for postal ballots, they would set a time as to when they were going to issue them, and candidates and agents in the respective electoral districts would be invited to come to the elections office and observe that process being carried out. Similarly, the agents will be allowed on the bus next week as we go door to door in mobile polling, so that they again are able to observe the process and make sure that it's transparent. So the bus will have election officers, workers, accompanied by police for security reasons, and candidates and or agents on the bus. So it'll be a traveling bus full of people, we'll say, that will go.
It's a traveling
house
polling
to house.
station.
Yeah.
And just really quickly, if an agent sees a problem, you mentioned one option, something that's a concern, how is that handled?
They raise if an agent sees an issue going on during the polls, during the postal ballot issue, they raise it as an objection with the presiding officer, returning officer, and then there's a process to deal with those. Each presiding officer actually has a book of activities that they keep track of, voters that vote, any objections, any issues, who had to take an oath, who needed assistance. If there's an objection, it's logged in there as well. So they would raise that as an objection.
Okay. Okay, I have two questions. My first question, how confident are you that the public fully understands the electoral process, the new electoral process, in terms of actually going out and voting? And my second question would be, what is your anticipation of election day itself, voter turnout, that kind of thing?
Yeah. I believe that because we started our education process essentially about a year ago now, about the one person, one vote, the one vote for one person in your electoral district. We've been getting the message out, and it's become quite real since nomination day, when the candidates, declare themselves. They're going door to door. They're explaining to persons, this, I'm in your area. The media has been brilliant with, the materials published, either electronically or the broadcasts that have been going out. So I think everybody that wants to know has an opportunity to know. We will continue with our messaging next week about, your one voter with one vote for one candidate in your electoral district. And we ask for you to join us in pushing that message out. But the candidates have been doing, their part as well in the sort of partnership of voter education. But I can say from, do they get it or not, we were invited to go to Sunrise Center and share with them how the system worked, and we went through a mock exercise, and they cast their votes. And they knew what they were doing. They knew to vote for one candidate. They came back after having been instructed, just as they would on polling day, and voted. 95% of them voted for one person, and it was brilliant. So I'm saying they're a shining example for the rest of us that we can all do it and go out there and mark that one X. I can say, based on my experience working in the electoral district of what was West Bay, when persons had up to 4 votes, there were persons voting for one candidate, there were persons voting for 2, 3, or 4. Some persons voted for everybody that was on the ballot paper, but there were very few of those, less than 1%. But even then, people knew exactly what they wanted to do when they came into the polling station. So if they only wanted to support one candidate, they only marked one, even though they had 4. So we're just driving home that message, and it'll be repeated again immediately before they go into that poll booth, that it's 1. Sorry, you had a second question. Did I miss that one?
The voter turnout.
So, I've heard all the, we're expecting low voter turnout numbers. We have about 4 times the postal ballots issued this time around than we did in 2013. So for me, that shows that there's interest for persons wanting to vote by postal. And if that's an indication of what they're going to do for polling day, then we expect our folks to come out and vote in their numbers as normal. So that's, high 70s, 80% turnout on election day. Because 480 plus postal votes is quite a bit. And we still have one more day to go for them
I
to
think we
apply.
had, 3,000 additional registrations?
2,000, over 2,000 new
Over
persons
2,000.
registered.
Yeah.
So I'm confident that folks are going to vote in their numbers, and I encourage them to do so.
Okay, I have one more question before I pass the mic to you. My final question. We had an incident earlier this week where we had a heckler that allegedly led to an accident. I don't want you to speak to that incident in particular, but overall, we're heading into the elections. We're 12 days away, 13 days away from the election. What message would you send to voters out there in terms of those kinds of incidents?
Yeah, I mean, those things are very unfortunate and sheds a sort of negative light on the election process. I must say, for the most part, this campaigning exercise, this go around has been fairly professional and straightforward. We've gotten very few complaints from candidates or from the public, and those that we've passed through to the police. From that process on, we're sort of hands off. They collect evidence, and if there's enough there to take matters through to prosecution, then that will happen. But I can say, it's disrespectful to do what was alleged to be done the other night, and I just ask people to be respectful of other persons and carry out this process peacefully, as the Cayman Islands have done proudly for generations.
It was an unfortunate incident, but I think it appears to have been a one-off. And so from the elections office standpoint, we really do have to consider whether it is a single incident or in terms of the scale of the election campaign versus a new culture evolving in the election, which requires further actions. I don't think that we have reached that state, but certainly the police responded very quickly. It is not part of how we operate in the Cayman Islands in terms of what is allowable. So we will see to what extent this is a one-off in the future or it becomes a continuing nuisance. But certainly to the persons who were injured as a result of that the person on the motorbike, I really do wish them a speedy recovery. And it was extremely, extremely unfortunate for all concerned.
Mr. Howell, any anticipation as to when the final count will come in on election day? And secondly, you mentioned there, I think, 6 polling stations where there will be effectively a double count. I guess, why specifically those 6 stations?
So we're expecting results to be in sort of starting around 9 o'clock for East End, North Side, Cayman Back East, Cayman Back West, and Little Cayman, just because they have smaller numbers of voters on their registers. The other ones we're hoping to be in before midnight, and for those that we have the simultaneous counting, 10, 11 o'clock. If we go past midnight, it'll be unexpected for us. Yeah. In terms of why we have, so we've appointed 19 returning officers this time around. For those of you who covered the 2013 election, you would know that we had 18 deputy returning officers, but we only had 6 returning officers. So we have some returning officers now who are new in a returning officer role. Some of the electoral districts have larger numbers of voters, 1,400, 1,500. So we've placed our deputies either with our new returning officers or in electoral districts where we have higher numbers of voters.
And it's a good way for succession planning in the elections office. We have a really stalwart team, some who have worked elections for many, many years, some who are coming on board now, but certainly we need to keep that institutional knowledge, build capacity for future elections, and this is a means by which we can do that.
And also just a question, I guess, about photo opportunities. In previous years, we've been able to get sort of shots of people bringing the ballot boxes into the sort of central counting station, I guess. Will the media be allowed to see any of the counting? Will we have access?
So typically at the count, the results are announced, well, not typically, by law they're announced on the spot at each of the electoral districts. So because we are sort of announcing the progression of the count as it happens by box, you will see how close we are to getting done. So you can freely go then out to a polling division electoral district and hear the announcement to see that happening there. The actual boxes coming back in are boxes that have already been counted. Those are sort of a backdoor event this time around. So in terms of photo op, we leave early in the morning on the morning of election. So those ballot boxes and all the materials be delivered, well before 6 o'clock. So yeah, if you're an early riser, you can catch us. If otherwise, we'll be out when it's dark and early, and back in at dark again once the counts are finished. Your photo ops are really going to be around the announcements happening at the end of the count. That's Carl, you've been really patient.
Well, I'm going to get good answers then. I have 2 questions about polling stations, one about liquor.
Yes.
The first question relates to who may be present. The elections law, section 56, sets out very specifically who may be in the polling station. Now, election day is wonderfully a public holiday.
Yes.
But that means schools are closed. So what do we do with the mother who brings her 3 children with her when she wants to vote? Is she allowed?
So the excellent question. So the kids are not allowed into the polling booth or the polling station. So I have memory of our field officers cradling an infant while the mother went in to vote and came back. In those cases, we allowed the mother to go to the front of the line so that she can come back quickly before the baby started crying. But if persons have no other form of childcare, then they can come, we'll look after the kids while they run in to do their business and come back. And another key thing for us is what's not allowed in the polling station are cell phones or any cameras. So we have a system of tagging those and giving them back, but that takes time. So our advice is leave it in the car or leave it at home. Just don't bring it with you, so we don't have to go through that process.
You anticipated my second question. Is that in the elections law somewhere, or is that just a common sense?
The camera?
The camera
and phones,
cell phone.
that is part of the whole secrecy of the vote thing. So if you look back to the U.S. elections, there were pictures of the presidential candidates.
Please don't compare us to the U.S. elections.
But they were there casting their votes, and that was tweeted out and those sorts of things. For us on election day, that's a closed door matter and not.
Right. As to the sale of liquor, then it's not allowed
until an hour after the close of the polls.
Right. What about premises such as restaurants who have liquor licenses? Are they allowed to open as a restaurant under any restrictions?
So I've asked the question of the Solicitor General's office. I haven't received a response back yet. So we received questions about hotels, restaurants, duty-free persons who are serving or selling duty-free items to tourists coming in by cruise ship or leaving at the airports. So as soon as I get that, we'll announce that out to the media, because that's an FYI. But as it is in the law now, intoxicating liquor cannot be sold until an hour after the polls close, so that's not until 7 p.m.
Thank you, sir.
Can you break down the number of boxes that you have per constituency, or will that information be made available? Just so I can imagine a couple of the teams might have to split their resources to cover all 19 constituencies, but
So the constituencies are up on our website, a list of those. I can share the ones, actually I already shared the ones that have that double count. They're not counting extra boxes. I'll give you an example of how the boxes are made up. So in Bordentown we have 4 polling stations split up by last name. So if your last name is between Abbott and Ebanks, you're in polling station 1. So there's 4 boxes, 1 for each polling station. We have 2 mobile boxes, so that's 6, and then we have a postal box, makes 7. So those 7 boxes being counted, and if they're returning officer and a deputy counting, we'll split them up so that one counts, 2 or 3 boxes, and then the other one counts the rest of them. The system that we have set up actually tracks what has been counted and what's remained to be counted. So that's a graphical interface that we'll have a link from our website off to that, and it's divided by electoral district. So it'll actually show which candidates are leading based on what box has been counted. So we're going to do our part to make sure that you have enough news to give out on election evening.
and then my second question is on the note of vote buying, treating, and gifting. You said that you guys received complaints. Complaints against which candidates and or parties, if you might.
So I won't go into individual candidates. Actually, very few have been specific candidates. We've heard folks are serving full-on turtle dinner with lobster and all sorts of stuff, but usually those come in the day afterwards. So what we've said is, listen, you telling us the day after an event has happened really doesn't help us very much, or help the police to be able to collect enough evidence to do something about it. If you're there, you see something happening, then call through, and they'll go out and deal with it. So the law covers treating, which is excessive provisions, and then it goes into vote buying, which is sort of a separate thing. So this is more on the line of we're giving you some sort of inducement in order to ensure that you vote a certain way, and that can happen before or after the election in terms of the inducement. So those are really more complex to investigate, but again, if there's doubt, if there's questions, call the police.
And just to clarify, has the elections office recommended investigations be launched into any candidate so far? Or?
We have asked, and we've passed on information that we've had, but at this point I think it's prejudicial to call a name because it's a allegation that's been made. So I don't think you'll find anybody that's going to stand up and say, we've been asked to look into candidate Z for a particular reason, because at this point it's a complaint.
I think the elections office will receive complaints, but because we do not have an enforcement arm under the elections law, all complaints must be investigated by the RCIPS. So the most that we can do is to refer the matter to the police, any information that has been brought to our attention, and the RCIPS, like any other sort of criminal complaint, will investigate, and once their case file has all the evidence has been put together, then they would refer the matter, as in any other criminal case, to the Office of the Director of Public Prosecution, who will look at the evidence against the statutory provision and make a decision as to whether or not there's sufficient evidence to lay a charge. So that's how it is. We don't have the power or the jurisdiction to investigate, but we can, when anything that comes in, we will document and refer the matter directly to the RCIPS, and that's what we've been doing.
Mr. Holland, you said that it would be prejudicial to call
I'm not prepared to answer what district. Like I said, it's a matter for investigation.
Yeah.
These are allegations that are coming forward, nothing more than that. So, yeah, and for us, if I can put it in a picture for you, somebody brings a ball to us and says, you know, somewhere in this, there may be some criminal activity, something of an election offense. We start the ball rolling with the police, and then we step away. Where the ball goes is not our concern. So until it comes out the other end, if somebody's convicted, then we'll deal with it. But our role at this point is only relaying information, and even that I'm saying to persons, you don't need to necessarily use us as a second person. You can report that directly to the police.
I mean, even technically, when the police investigation is running, we have no authority to request information about how is it going and so forth. That is a domain of the police. So we cannot prematurely prejudice candidates. Like, for example, we see examples of that in recent past elections in other jurisdictions. So, you know, a complaint has been made. When we receive it, it's a bare complaint. We send it forward, and then we have the capacity to dig into the evidence, question people, and really see whether it's legitimate or is it something that has been orchestrated or fabricated.
So, I mean,
and that's for their assessment.
And to put it another way, you probably hear the same things that I hear. You wouldn't go on air and say that you've heard something. We can't do it either. We get sued just like you get sued.
Mr. Howell, one question. What percentage of registered voters have picked up their ID cards?
You know,
we knew
we knew we were going to get that question. And I did request that information at our project meeting yesterday. But the folks have been so busy, we were actually issuing cards from 3 locations in some cases at the same time. And we just haven't been able to collate that information back. But I do know Little Cayman is easy. There are 28 voters in Little Cayman. We went over on Tuesday, and we took by boat while we were going to Cayman Brack. Somebody went over and took pictures in Little Cayman, so we'll send their IDs to them. And we got 25 of the 28 Little Cayman. Cayman Brack, we issued approximately another 500 on Tuesday, so the Brack is about 90% done. But some of the larger districts we're still working through. But we'll have those numbers for you.
Yeah, we started issuing voter ID at the Cayman Brack agricultural show. That was the first issue of cards. And then in the middle of April, we did the rest. We started the big drive. So it's been running for almost a month. On the 19th, it will be about a month that there has been card issuance. Every weekend, Friday and Saturday, all major supermarkets. We've been going to other places, I think, very early on within this month period. Almost every day the elections office 3rd floor has been available, and I sat in on a couple of the days you were issuing, and people were streaming in from the morning right up until we closed. Lunchtime, they just came in, and very early in April. So I think that there are lots of people who are keen to get their cards, and certainly I know that it's very difficult to distribute some 21,000 electoral cards, and we really hope that we have made a very good dent. We'll have firm numbers, but we do have a plan to hopefully increase that number. And I think once we've wrapped the exercise up, we will probably discuss that more with the voters and the media.
So this afternoon we're in East End. We go up at 3 and we stay until 6:30. So we hope to get some of the East Enders when they get home this afternoon, and that's at the public library. So we're there until 6:30. And then tomorrow morning we're at Northside Clinic. While the clinic is open from 9 until 12.
Yeah.
We'll be doing at the elections office tomorrow and all of next week 9 to 5. So.
So just to follow up, your general feeling is that we will pass that 80%.
Well, we have in Cayman Brack. I'm not saying that we're going to pass that in Grand Cayman because it's a different kettle of fish altogether.
Yeah. We have different voters.
Do you have a minute to speak about field officers? These are the people that the voters will see first.
Yes.
As they go to the polling stations.
Yes.
And what should the voters expect in their interaction with the field officers?
Okay, excellent question. You're showing your experience with our process. So, persons showing up to the polling station or electoral district for the first time, the first person that they will meet is an elections office field officer, dressed in a khaki-colored polo shirt. They are there with a list of persons register to vote within that electoral district, and then also in which polling station. They'll check IDs quickly, secure cell phones if you brought them that far, and then direct voters off to their individual polling station.
Hold children.
And hold children as well. If you show up to the wrong electoral district, they have a list of all the electoral districts, so they'll redirect you. So another good reason not to leave it till 5 minutes to 6 p.m. in the evening, because you may not have enough time to get to the next polling station. But that's our first step. We have what we call logistical officers. They help guide people to the right polling station, offer assistance if necessary. And then you enter the room, and there are presiding officers who's in charge of the polling station, and their poll clerks who are sort of their administrative arm. That's our team, and that's replicated across 57 polling stations on all 3 islands.
Mr. Wesley, just quickly, the complaints, can you give us a number if nothing else?
It's been less than half a dozen for
Less
me.
than half a dozen.
Yeah.
Okay, just one quick clarification, read the polling stations. So each constituency has a differing number of polling stations depending on its voter size, presumably.
Yes.
Have you got somewhere, will the central polling station where the counts will happen, have they been identified on the website in every district so we'll know where? I'm just thinking for our logistics, that's all. Like, which polling station do we need to be at?
It's at the same place.
Yeah.
No, if you've got in Bodden Town West, you say there's 4 polling stations or whatever.
All at Bodden Town Primary School. So we'll use the Bodden Town Hall in one classroom to do the count, but the boxes aren't moving, but one room over.
Oh, so in other words, the polling station, even though there's 4 polling stations, they're actually all in the same place.
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah.
okay. I didn't realise that.
Which was what we were explaining. So the candidates are going to be very visible because they're only moving from one room to the next on the same site. No longer do they have to go to multiple sites because they're only having votes cast for them in one location.
The logistics.
So this thing's changed the landscape a whole lot.
Oh,
for
right, okay.
us.
Oh, I thought the fact that you'd have more than one polling station in each constituency
Yeah.
was so that people would have even less
No.
steps to take from their house to their polling thing.
No, so it's
So
all-
they're
yeah,
not
all-
scattered throughout the okay.
So Bodden Town West, for example, is at the primary school, and there are 4 classrooms in a line.
So the count will be in one of those
classes,
rooms at the
yeah.
right. Okay. And these maps where all the polling stations are all on the website.
list-
You've got
the
a
list are
map,
on
but it's
the
just a list.
The list
Okay.
on the website. all the way down to the address. Yeah. You might put it on your map. Yeah. I like your map. Any other questions? Folks, I want to thank you. If there's anything else, Miss Bina has been our stalwart liaison. Things are coming at us kind of fast and furious across the road, so she does assist with alerting us any queries coming through. But I thank you for coming out, and thank you for helping us spread the word. We have collectively, I believe, done a brilliant job of getting the message out about the changes, what's going on, and what's happening when. So thank you much for your cooperation.
Thank you.
Thank you.